It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning again, everyone. Well, the United States' relationship with science is under strain on two fronts. The share of Americans who say science has had a mostly positive impact on society, well, that share has fallen 16 percentage points since before the coronavirus outbreak, from 73% saying mostly positive impact in 2019 down to 57% in 2023, that according to the Pew Research Center. At the same time, federal science funding has faced an unprecedented political assault, and that's continuing. The exact numbers are complicated to pin down, but here are some stats from a Nature article from January this year. Over the course of 2025, more than 7,800 National Institutes of Health and National Science Foundation grants were canceled or suspended, and the Trump administration proposed historic cuts of 35% to non-defense research and development in its fiscal year 2026 budget request. One program right here in our backyard in the New York area is aiming to tackle the erosion of trust in our scientific institutions in a creative and unconventional way. The Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University is a program that uses improv theater training to help scientists talk to the rest of us. The center, founded by MASH star Alan Alda more than 15 years ago, has now trained more than 35,000 researchers worldwide, with clients ranging from Stanford to NASA to AstraZeneca. And joining us now is its director, Laura Lindenfeld. Hey, Laura, welcome to WNYC.
Hi, Brian. So pleased to be here with you today.
And our phones and text thread are open for this. If you're a scientist, doctor, researcher, whatever, what are some moments or topics when communication has broken down between you and whoever you consider your public? Are you noticing an increase in skepticism, fewer people signing up for clinical trials if you're that kind of researcher, maybe more vaccine skepticism if you're a physician, or maybe there are conversations happening even in your social circles that you just can't seem to break through to loved ones on, even if you're an expert in the field. So tell us your story, help us report this story, but also tell us what you think works as not just a scientist or a physician or someone scientist adjacent, but what works in communicating. 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. Call or text for Laura Lindenfeld, who is the director of the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University. All right, Laura, what was the insight that made Alan Alda say, wait, these scientists need improv training?
It's such a great concept, isn't it? Alan did Scientific American Frontiers for 11 years. He served as host. We have some really fun footage of that we sometimes show in our workshops. And it occurred to him as he was interviewing scientists just how naturally they would talk with them. I mean, who wouldn't? He's so wonderful and kind. And he had this thought one day. There was a person he was interviewing, and when she could make eye contact with him, everything was going great. And then suddenly it's like the white lab coat went back on. She kind of froze, looked at the camera, and the connection dropped. And then he got the connection back, and then it happened again, and he thought, oh man, what's going to happen if I'm not here to pull these stories out of people? And he had the idea that improvisational theater, which was the only training he actually had as an actor, might help. So Alan, in his inimitable style, went around to a bunch of universities in the greater New York City metro area and said, how would you like for me to try improv with your scientists? And Stony Brook said yes, and that's how it got started.
For people not in theater or who've never, participated in or witnessed improv, the core concept you teach is yes and. Explain yes and for people who don't know it.
Yes and is this beautiful mindset of, and I think it comes into play when we talk about science and trust, so I hope we can dig into this. It's the idea that you acknowledge the dignity and humanity of the other person, even if you don't agree with them, and you make that scene, that interaction with them move forward. Yes, and to the person and the situation, the conversation. And I also should say, we are not interested in making scientists into actors or putting them on stage. We're interested in using improv to help people connect.
Can you walk us through one sample exercise? What does it look like in the room? What are the scientists actually doing in an improv session that's supposed to help their science communication, and, related to what skill it's supposed to build?
Yeah. So the way that our team works is they really build, I'm going to describe to you just a couple of pieces of what is an 8-hour training experience, because the sequence is built. It's kind of like going to the gym where you're like, today I'm going to work my biceps and tomorrow I'm going to work on my legs. If you want your whole body to function together, you got to work all those muscles together. So we isolate some of these competencies through exercises, like helping people really connect through eye contact and body language. And then what's at the core of these exercises is imagining what the other person that you're trying to connect with may be feeling or thinking, so you can ground yourself as much as humanly possible in their perspectives. So we'll do an exercise like a classic mirror exercise where if you and I were sitting across from each other, we'd hold our hands up and try to move together such that people couldn't tell who's leading and who's following. And you really get that sense of connection. That's one example of an exercise. We do others where I love this exercise. It's called rant, where you rant to your partner. We do a lot of work in partners, so we're never putting you really up on stage to perform. It's about communicating with people in your life, in your world, and practicing that with a partner, where you might talk about something that really makes you angry, and your partner then has to debrief that and share what the value is underlying that. So there's 2 rules to improv. We talked about the first one, yes and. The second one is really, really important as well, and it may even be a little bit harder. It's called make your partner look good. Even if you disagree with them, your job in the communication is to make them look good.
Talk for a second before we take some calls and texts about what Alan Alda may have picked up on among some of the scientists who you were describing as communicating in an easy, breezy, and clear and audience-friendly way when they were talking one-on-one with him, but then when the mic went on in some public setting, they kind of froze up. Does it go back to the fact, and I realize this is going to be an overgeneralization, but, if you're a humanities major in college, you're probably a communicator. Or interested in communication as, one of the core things, whether it's literature or public speaking or whatever it is. Same thing if you're a social science major, maybe you're interested in making those kinds of political arguments that attach to social science or talking about history. But if you're a science major, you're maybe somebody who's not as comfortable in those realms and you're geeking out in the lab. And all those sorts of things. Does any of it, and then I have another theory to add as another piece possibly, but how much is that at the root of this problem the scientists might have communicating?
I love that we're building theory here, so I'm going to yes and add to this. Yeah, I think there is something disciplinary about this, but let me just say generally, if you look at what are the things that people in the U.S. are most afraid of, there are many people who would rather get cancer than speak in public. So public speaking is just a scary thing for so many of us. I think the way we're trained in the sciences is to be really specific, to be really thorough. The way we share information, the kind of language we use. I think jargon is in the eye of the beholder, and we need it in the sciences. It's shortcuts that help people move their research forward. I don't think we've treated communication as core competency for conducting science. And one of the things we do at the center is we're trying to build that into the experience of what it even means to become a scientist. You have to communicate. You have to communicate with your teams, with your labs, with your colleagues. And when you're good at that, it actually helps you communicate with public audiences who may not share your values or perspectives or the insights that you have.
Yeah, I agree. It should be core. And I don't know how much this kind of ethic abounds in, science curricula at colleges around the country. I actually studied risk communication in grad school. And it is such an art to go with the science that you're trying to communicate, and it is a very specific set of skills. So the other thing that I was going to throw out, you kind of touched on in your answer there, which is how scientists are trained to be specific.
Yeah.
And I think scientists are very aware of uncertainties.
Yes.
And not speaking in absolutes, right? Because that's the way they dig into the data at a truly scientific level. And so you get up there and you don't want to make some sweeping political statement as a scientist usually, or you don't want to overstate the reality when there's a 23% chance that won't happen, whatever the thing is, even though that means there's a 77% chance that it will. And so you don't say this is. And, and it could be that failure to communicate uncertainty is part of the problem in trust declining in science, because let's say you say COVID vaccines are safe, right? And COVID vaccines are overwhelmingly safe, but there is a small percentage of people who are going to have serious reactions. And so it's a nuance there, right?
Yes.
You can't just go out as a scientist and say COVID vaccines are safe. You say COVID vaccines are 97% safe, whatever the actual number is, and you leave that uncertainty in the conversation, but in a way that hopefully won't paralyze people from, taking the most important action they can take.
I so appreciate your background in risk. It's really akin to what we do, and we draw on risk and risk communication in science communication. I like to think about it this way, and this is a very complex subject. We've actually done some work on science in the courtroom, where it's very easy to get tripped up on your statistics and be accurate. And I would never, first of all, we want people to be honest and genuine. That's what we're after. We're really after ethical, grounded communication. And we help scientists learn how to strategize. It's not enough to go into a space and just improvise. The improvisation is there as a vehicle, as a tool to help you get the messages and content out that you want to share in alignment with what you think will land with your audiences. So I like to think of this as cultural gaps that we need to overcome. If somebody says driving is safe, what do you think about that? I get in the car. Well, I live on Long Island, so I have to get in a car and drive because I don't have New York City Transit out there. But I get in the car and drive every day, and I know there's a risk. So this is
right.
so
cultural.
This
actually touches on my favorite example in risk communication, which is when people drive their own cars, they don't tend to get nervous, because the risk psychology, risk perception aspect of it is that you have a feeling of control when you're driving your own car.
Yes.
And that makes you overestimate how safe the thing is. When you're flying in an airplane, people are much more likely to be nervous that they may not come out alive on the other end. But statistically, oh my God, the comparison, it's not even close. It's galaxies different. You almost never die on an airplane. Just listen to the traffic reports every morning about all these crashes. And, we know car crashes are such a common thing. But what do you have the fear reaction in your body for? Is it driving or is it flying? And it's completely illogical, but I think it helps explains the problem that scientists are up against.
And I think you just nailed this. What you feel in your body. This is a feeling issue. And I think we're often trained in the sciences to approach things solely from a cognitive perspective. Here are the facts. I'm going to give these facts to you, and they're going to land. And Alan has this wonderful saying. He says, when we just spray information out there like facts, That's not communication. It's excommunication. And then everybody laughs. It's great. Thank you for laughing. I think we have to start thinking about people as feeling beings who also happen to think, rather than thinking beings who also happen to feel. And when we start to approach people from like, what does it mean if I have words in my head or ideas in my head that I want to land in your heart, that I want you to remember? It's improv helps us flip the dynamic so we're communicating to be heard, to be remembered. And that means taking the other person really seriously, even if you don't agree with their values. And this can be very, very hard. I've done this exercise in large groups where I have people imagine a position with which you firmly disagree. Could be about vaccines, climate, whatever. You disagree with this position. And close your eyes, and for a few minutes, imagine someone holding that belief, what it took to get there, what might be behind that. And instead of judging it and arguing against it, imagine why that might make sense. And that's a position that puts you into trying to feel with the other person. That doesn't mean you agree with them on the pieces you disagree about, but rather that you acknowledge their humanity and dignity. There's something about humility in improv that I really love. You have to be paying attention, whether it's one person who's your partner or whether you're, like, I'm communicating through you to many, many people right now. And I'm trying to imagine what people might be interested in hearing and saying it in a way that I hope will land with them. That's basis of improv, that empathy.
You know what some of our listeners are interested in as they're making clear the political aspects of this, which I want to bring up some of as we go, but I want to get some callers on here first because people have some experiences to share, some scientists calling in. And listeners, if you're just joining us, my guest is Laura Lindenfeld, who is director of the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University. It's a program that uses improv theater training to help scientists talk to the rest of us. And the context, as we said in the intro, is that the share of Americans who say science has had a mostly positive impact on society has fallen 16 percentage points since before COVID, from 73% in 2019 to 57% in 2023. And there is this loss of political support for science funding. Federal science funding is down 35% for non-defense research at the federal level in the fiscal year 2026 budget request from the Trump administration, and already more than 7,800 NIH and National Science Foundation grants were canceled or suspended by the Trump administration. 7,800 already canceled. But let's get some callers in here. Gary in New Rochelle, you're on WNYC. Hi, Gary.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Hi.
Oh, wonderful. This is such a great conversation, so I want to thank you for it. And I wasn't aware of this institute, and I think it sounds like the work you do is really important. I have stories about that, but I'm going to skip over that. I'm an MD PhD. I'm retired, a geneticist. And I think one of the major problems we have is that education in science is difficult, but is also rather poor. And obviously a lot of people get turned off, and by the time they're adults, they've forgotten anything they've learned. And I've written about this in my blog, if anybody's interested, the new argumentclinic.com. It's NEUE. And I just want to describe the way I like to think what science is, trying to get rid of most of the jargon that we use. And it's really a system of learning based on verified predictions. So for forever, people have wanted to predict the future. When is the volcano going to blow up? When do I plant? When is the rain coming? but we didn't have methods for
As
prediction
Kalshi and
that worked.
Polymarket have figured out how to capitalize on. Just saying.
Right.
But go ahead, Gary.
Yes. Yeah, but so these, the methods people use, examining entrails, bones, whatever, they didn't work, and it took the invention of modern science for people to develop methods of verifying predictions. And the piece that comes along with this is that there are no facts in science. And we never speak about that. And that's why people get confused.
What do you mean by that? And then I'm going to go on to another caller. But what do you mean there are no facts in science?
What I mean
is that what you said?
There are no facts in science. And the best example is Newton versus Einstein's view of the universe. We haven't thrown out Newton's methods. We still use them to send probes to other planets. But it's not the best description of the universe as we understand it today. So everything that we know is subject to verification over and over and in new ways. And if it fails, then we understand that we need an improved way of understanding.
Gary, thank you for all of that. Yes, and Josephine in Highland Park. You're on WNYC. Hi, Josephine.
Yes, thank you. I've worked with AI models since the 1980s, and I'm very concerned about how all AI is being painted with the same brush these days. Not all AI is created equal. I work as a user experience researcher, which means I improve people's lives using behavioral science research methods, mostly in the area of software. And, I wish that people understood more of the math under the hood of some of these AI applications, because if they did, they'd understand the limitations and the possibilities of AI. But AI is not a tool. It's been around for 75 years as a body of knowledge and a field of study.
Can I jump in on this?
Go ahead.
I so
Laura.
appreciate that you brought this up, and it's something the center is working on. Look, communication evolves and changes, and as it does, the way that we prepare scientists, engineers, healthcare to communicate about their expertise has to change. And I just spent, I'll also say the center's doing a lot of work now on engineering communication, which I think has lots of similarities too, but also differences from science communication. We just spent a couple of weeks in Europe. I have colleagues at the University of Tübingen in Germany, and we're doing work with them. They take rhetorical approaches to AI and science communication, and we're working with them to figure out how to deal with exactly this point that you just brought up with your comment, because perceptions, it's a bit like the airplane versus car safety perception. We've got to be able to be accurate about these tools, and quite frankly, a lot of people are using them, and we should be clearer in our communication as to what the risks and opportunities are.
Right. And when she talks about looking at the numbers under the hood, it makes me think that science communicators could take some lessons from, let's say, sports talk radio.
I love that.
Because look at like in baseball, for somebody who follows baseball, you could say, oh, that batter has an OPS of 950. And every casual baseball fan will say, wow, 950 OPS. That's great. But what is OPS? It's this really obtuse combination of two different rates, the number of bases per at bat. What is that even? Plus, not even, an average of the two averages, plus the on base percentage, which is the, percentage of times that you're up that you get on base. And you have to add those two different rates together to get the OPS. And yet baseball fans could say, wow, 950 OPS, that's really great. If we could do that in science, right?
I mean, this is like an insider-outsider thing. If you're inside on this and you're part of the culture and you understand everything you just said, great. And if you're not, you're standing there with your jaw hanging open. We actually used to use an example of a piece from a newspaper about baseball, and we'd bring this in, and we'd have people read it and say, everybody get it? And inevitably folks in the room who didn't grow up in the U.S. would be like, I have no idea what this is about.
Right.
And then we'd try to have folks explain it to each other, and they'd realize this is another example of improv. Like, explain this in a way that this person's going to remember it. And by the end of it, you can't explain every detail of how baseball works to understand what this particular media piece was about. You had to give the punchline.
Nat on Staten Island, you're on WNYC. Hi, Nat.
Hi, Brian. I'm hearing what you're talking about, and the reason I called was my experience working in healthcare, and COVID taught me some very valuable lessons, all of which the things you're saying to me are like totally pertinent. I had a huge conversation with my son about this. Your conversation, I can't remember the caller's name, with the PhD, who was saying that we're still using Newton's laws, but we're also using Einstein's. We're also post-Einstein. And now you're talking about baseball jargon. I'm one of those people that when you said that, I have no idea what you're talking about, none at all. And your guest talking about how people feel. So if you make me feel like I'm an idiot, I can't listen to you anymore, But if you're like, oh, you don't understand this, so let me try to help you understand it.
Yes.
If people are open to it, that's what the key is, and I can see why this program would be great. My experience in healthcare working when COVID hit, I was a science major. A lot of people that work in healthcare are not. A lot of people are, but they don't remember their high school or their college science. So when you're talking about cell biology, when you're talking about complex things, people don't know the jargon. They don't even know what you're talking about.
Nat, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much. And, it pertains, Laura, I think not only, and I think, I'm going to be honest here. I think some of the callers have not been good examples of science communicators. I thought the Newton versus Einstein guy, lost people in the weeds. It's just me, but I think it shows how difficult it is for well-intentioned people. Here's one more text, and this brings it to a very personal level of not just scientists coming out of their labs or coming out of NASA or public health, government agencies, but one-on-one with patients. Listener writes, I'm a surgeon and have had to deliver horrible news during the course of my career. Having the ability to clearly communicate with patients is a vital skill that is largely overlooked. An improv class should be a mandatory part of the training we all take. And so that person is talking about as physicians. So just give me a very quick response to that, and then I'm going to ask you that politics question, and then we're done.
Okay. I love that. And I think this is about grounding ourselves in who our audiences are and what they need. That's fundamentally what the improv does. And when there's like a whole bunch of great data, and I'm kind of teeing up your next question about what people think and believe and feel, and we need to look at that too. We need to understand who believes what and how did they come to the conclusion they came to, and how are we going to meet them on terms where we can have a dignified conversation and listen to each other and learn, even if we disagree.
So we have a group in this country trying explicitly to diminish people's trust in science because it's in their political interest. Just like President Trump is currently lying about there being statistical evidence of fraud in the California primaries because he's taking statistics of, when different groups of votes are counted under California law and saying, there, you see, it was this 3 days ago and now it's this now. It's obviously fraud. Well, that's on purpose to try to destroy trust in election ballot counting. This is going on with science as well. Tell me if you don't think so and if this makes it harder.
I mean, when you look at this trust literature from Pew and other reputable sources. This is very important, and I look at this data as often as I can, and you see that there is difference based on political party. It also breaks down by educational level, where you live in the country, on and on and on. I think what we are trying to do at the center, and we're at Stony Brook here on Long Island. We travel around the world to deliver these workshops, and what I'm really hoping to do is scale these efforts and do more. We do about 100 to 150 workshops a year all over the place. I think it's really critical that we have scientists, engineers, healthcare professionals trained so that they can take this empathic approach to communication and build trust. There's politicization of science, for sure. There are a lot of people who don't know who to trust and who to listen to. And the more that individual people can build trust across their communities on soccer, baseball fields, in religious institutions, maybe someone who might not have listened to science before will.
I'll close with two texts that came in from the same person along the way in this conversation. One of them says, social media and instant clips of videos as forms of communication have been a huge layer to people not being willing to sit patiently while the research is happening, to remember that sometimes along the path of the scientific method, we do get things wrong before we get it right with a new discovery. So they wrote that as we were talking, and then just a minute ago they wrote again, Laura Lindenfeld is the best communicator you've ever had on your show, Brian. Please invite her back.
Oh, you made my day. And let me just say, trust may be challenged, but it's not broken. And I'm hopeful, and I think there's a lot we can do together. So thank you for having me on.
Laura Lindenfeld is director of the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University, a program that uses improv theater training to help scientists talk effectively to the rest of us. Thanks for sharing it with us.
Thank you.